Hey guys, are you taking the SAT soon, maybe even this weekend, and wondering how you can avoid the kind of careless errors that sometimes tank your score? If so, in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. My name's Brooke. I've been coaching the SAT for over a decade and a half. I scored perfectly on the SAT as an adult. I've also coached a student on the most recent exam to a perfect 1600. And in this video, I'm going to share some of my tips with you. I also share all of my secrets for how to tackle the SAT in an online course. You can find that at SupertutorTV.com along with our ACT course. And if you're taking the ACT, we also have a couple of books on Amazon, so check those out. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, of course, and subscribe to our mailing list, totally free, SupertutorTV.com/subscribe. Cool. Announcements are over. Let's do this, people. Careless errors, by the way, are one of the most flummoxing things that I think we deal with in taking standardized tests. So in this video, I'm going to go quickly through 5 kinds of careless errors that people make and how you can proactively take steps to avoid them. I know sometimes when you say careless error, you think, oh my gosh, I made a careless error, shoulder shrug, there's nothing I can do. But that's not the truth. The truth is, even with careless errors, there are ways that you can change your approach in order to protect yourself from making these mistakes. And that's why this is a great video to watch right before your test, because it doesn't take that long to just absorb in what can I do to fix these problems, okay? Number 1, foggy brain mistakes. So one of the errors that I think sometimes happens to us when we take an SAT or any standardized test is sometimes we are human and our brains just stop working, okay? I call this a foggy brain mistake. It can happen because your blood sugar is low. It can happen because maybe your adrenaline dropped because the reading was so easy and you were like, oh my God, I can't believe the reading was so easy. And then you get to the writing and then you're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? So that's foggy brain. Foggy brain is when you look at a question, when you read the sentence and your brain seems to just stop working. It can also be when you're reading a passage and you feel like you just take a nap or you can't focus or you're thinking about your dog. But in any case, whatever kind of foggy brain you have, here's my remedy. Put a big check mark, put a big star, put a big circle, make a mark on your page, on your test booklet, so that you know to come back to these questions and double check them should you have any time at the end. If I ever have time at the end, the first place I go is my foggy brain questions, because the thing about foggy brain questions is the only reason you're probably missing them is because your brain stopped working for a few minutes, not because you can't do them. That's very different from questions where you actually struggled to try to figure out what the answer was and you already wrestled a little bit and you're not quite sure and it's hard. When you go back to those really hard ones, you may not get the right answer when you struggle some more. In fact, you may change your answer from the right answer to the wrong answer and just screw yourself over completely. So much better to go back to wherever your brain was a little bit on vacation or not paying attention or was having trouble focusing. So if you, like me, ever have trouble focusing, circle, star, whatever it is, and come back. Cool? Awesome. Number 2. The giving up, I hope this is it mentality. The second kind of careless error that I find that students make is that you guys don't fight for the answer. You give up and you just kind of say, I hope this is it. This mistake often happens toward the end of the test, and sometimes you don't even catch yourself doing it. Sometimes you're just humming along and you get to a complicated science reading passage and it's just like kind of annoying and you're like, oh my gosh, so many details. And then you get to question number 7 in the passage and you're just like, oh, my brain hurts. And you're like, oh, I don't think it's A. B doesn't really sound right. C is M. Maybe it's D. I hope it's D. D kind of sounds right. I'm just going to put it. And you kind of give up and you don't fight for the answer because you're tired and you're lazy. And again, it often happens on science questions and you just kind of let go a little too much. So these you can solve by being self-aware. Be aware of when you've given up. Be aware of the question where you felt too exhausted. And sometimes what you can do is just do the rest of the questions, like if you're in reading, do the rest of the questions in that particular section, and then come back to that one question after you finish that passage. So I don't want you necessarily to move on to a different passage and then come back to the question, but within that passage, do all the other questions in the passage, then come back to the I hope this is it kind of answer that you got to and dissect it. Remember, you don't want to fight for too long. So if you still can't figure it out after about 60 seconds, you know what? Fine, give up. But always make sure you put up a good fight. And to me, a good fight is putting in the time that you have allocated for each question so that you can finish on time. Finally, if that doesn't work, you can also just mark it and then come back to it at the very end if you happen to have time. Cool? Awesome. Number 3. Bubble shift errors. What are those and how do you avoid them? Bubble shift errors are, when you like fill out the bubbles and then you like skip a line for some reason, and then you start filling them out, and then it's like totally wrong, and then the whole page gets screwed up. Yeah, bad, terrible. Now, if this happens, you can often raise your hand and talk to your proctor, and they will give you a sheet at the end of the test to transfer over your answers if something like this happens. So if this does happen test day, know that sometimes there is a provision for you to kind of correct the error or whatever with help from a proctor, or get a new bubble sheet, and then you can kind of transfer it over, or you can kind of mark what it should be, and then they'll let you transfer it at the end. So if anything like this happens to you and you catch it, make sure you raise your hand. But how do you even catch it? Because sometimes we don't even catch it, right? One thing that you can do is I have some students who will do all of their circling on the page itself, especially if you go out of order. If you ever do questions out of order, I don't recommend direct bubbling because that can get very confusing and you have lots of gaps and there's lots of room for error there. So what I say is do everything on the page, and then after each passage, transfer all of those 10 or 11 questions over to your answer page when you're on the reading. Or with the math, you know, do one page, finish the whole page, and then you can transfer it over. Math I usually do in order. There's no real reason to do math out of order. The other thing that I like to do is as you go through the test, before you turn a page, just double check the number where you're filling in the bubble. Don't just finally fill in the next bubble. Look at the number and look at the bubble. If you particularly know you're prone to this, I also recommend that you do that at the bottom of every page, not just the pages that you're turning. So at the end of each page, you know, if you're a number 5, then say, okay, number 5 is B. As you transfer it over, don't just say B, look at 5 and B, and just check the number about every page at the end of the page, and that will at least keep you on track and make you alert if you made one of these errors. And if it's just a few questions, best to try to rebubble it yourself. And if you don't have time to rebubble it yourself, raise your hand, tell the proctor, and at least then you might have some way of managing the situation. Cool. And I can't guarantee that you're always going to be able to recopy things. I can't guarantee that SAT will always have a policy that forgives in that way, but I do know that these things happen and that there is a protocol that proctors are allowed to follow in the case that it does. Okay, number 4, word problem mishaps. Another careless error a lot of people make is they screw up word problem information. To avoid this, there's 2 techniques that you can use. One is underline words as you go through the word problem, and 2 is draw it out. As I like to say, when in doubt, draw it out. If there's a picture, draw it. If there's a concept, draw it. The more you draw, the more accurate you're going to be to the information that you just read, and the easier it is for you to go back to that information because you don't have to reread a paragraph to see it, understand it, absorb it, right? The final thing that people do in word problems in terms of word problem mishaps is they answer the wrong question, right? You might get through all the math, and you know what I'm talking about when you have that feeling of like, oh, I got the answer, because you finished a section of math and you have this feeling of relief because you got to a number. But that number might not be what you need. So always reread the question before you put an answer choice. That's just good rule of thumb on the SAT. My 5th stupid mistake is grammar from partial sentences. This is a classic mistake on the writing and language section. Make sure you read whole sentences whenever you're dealing with grammatical issues, anything that has to do with verbs or sentence structure or punctuation. If you only read a small segment of the sentence, you might move too fast, see a word that has an S, see the verb next to it, and think that that's the subject and that's the verb. You can't be that narrow-minded. You have to read whole sentences. So don't be somebody who falls for that. Read the whole sentence. Do not read partial sentences when doing grammar. That's all I've got for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. And head to our website, SupertutorTV.com, to see all the things that we have to offer. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.